Welcome to another CEO Wisdom podcast. We have James Vanreusel with us today, live from San Francisco. We're going to talk about CFO stuff mostly today. We're going to talk about podcasting and James' career, which is quite impressive. He's CFO at like 20 companies, or maybe 10 at the moment, but surely has been at a bunch of companies. Started his career at Bank of America Securities. Cool guy. Belgian, for those that wondered, Vanreusel. And this podcast is brought to you by podfire.com. If you want to start, scale, be invited to podcasts like this one or find sponsors, get invited to other shows, we are the agency for you. Podcasts are great. James will tell you he runs his own because you learn, because you meet new people, because you grow communities, you even generate leads and clients for your business. So podfire.com for that. James, welcome to the pod. Can you tell me a bit more about yourself and your companies?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Charles. So as you said, I'm originally from Belgium, grew up in Europe, and came over to the US because I really wanted to. I spent a couple of summers here. One of those was playing tennis at Bollettieri's Tennis Academy, which was a lot of fun. And so decided to come over to go to business school down in Texas at Rice, and then went to Wall Street for about 8 years. Did that, grew a little bit tired of that, went into microfinancing, so launching and operating banks in the Pacific, and then decided I would start my own corporate finance firm in San Francisco. And so for the last 9 years, me and my team have been providing CFO level work, FP&A controller work for lots of startups in the Bay Area and around the world.
Why did you get tired of Wall Street? Was it the stress? Because people definitely don't get tired of making that much money usually.
Yeah, a lot of it was stress, and just a very singular focus. A lot of times you get pigeonholed, and so you're an expert at a very small, limited thing. And I think I like doing a lot of other things as well. So it was great while I was there, but I was, glad to move on.
Right. And then all these CFO roles, is it fair to say that you're a fractional CFO and that you started doing that for the diversity of the experience it would bring you?
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the great things is that, it's like learning on steroids, working with different size companies, anything from pre-revenue to 100 million in revenue, from frontier tech like space or life sciences to traditional cabinetry companies and paving companies. So each one is very interesting, and just different business models, different ways of making money and having an impact.
Love it. Microfinance, do you make micro money in microfinance, or do you make macro money in microfinance?
I don't think you make macro money in microfinance, but I think you can make a big impact while still being profitable. So I still do a lot of work with nonprofits now that have impact at scale, but I still like the model where you can become sustainable. So over time you stop relying on philanthropy, foundations, grants, and really, even if it's not a hugely profitable endeavor, you're still making some money, and being able to scale using, sometimes low interest loans, or even selling equity. And so I think that's a very interesting model to have, and that's really what microfinance is focused on.
How have you calculated the impact that you had on these communities in your microfinance time?
Yeah, so a lot of the impact had to do with the outcome of increasing household income. So they would start their own jobs. And then, as with a lot of these impact measurements, you can have a 12-month impact, which was a small amount of increase in income, but you can also have a generational impact where the mothers, the parents are now sending their kids to college. And so it's really a 20-year impact that you're seeing rather than 12 or 24 months.
Right. Then you worked at a bunch of startups as a CFO. Which one was your, let's say, which top three were your favorite ones? And then what kind of insights have you got from them from a CFO perspective?
Yeah, so I think I'll talk about the different ranges that So one of my favorite was called Planet Labs, which is a space company. It's a public company now, and so they take satellite imagery of the whole world every day, and do good with it. So they have lots of different case studies. But one of the interesting things there was coming into a company that is making significant amounts of money already, and really working with established venture capital partners, big stakeholders, raising significant amounts of equity and debt, and working, kind of at the upper echelons of the startup ecosystem. Another company that I've loved working with is a company called Kidogo, which is a nonprofit based out of East Africa in Kenya, and they currently have the largest daycare slash preschool program in that country. And so that is a scaling operation that I've been with for the last 4 years when they were just starting out. So that has also been great. And then another one that's been really good to work with is a company called Csamples, which is a music software in this company. And so they are making a big pivot into a subscription service where you can go online, and they've integrated AI into this, and they have recorded all the music samples from every instrument there is out there. Last year, they actually went around the world and sampled the instruments from many different countries, and they've sampled them at some of the most famous venues like the Fox Studios, where they have the 20th Century Fox fanfare. And now you can go online and just say, like a Chat GPT, I want to create this kind of music, and then you drag and drop kind of the instruments that you want, and then it just starts creating something. And so as a composer or a hobbyist, you can just start creating music very easily. It's a great team, and love working with them. But you also asked about what do you learn, and there's just so much stuff to learn, so many things that can go wrong. And I think as you build experience, you anticipate things. You anticipate fundraising. You learn. One of the things that I've learned is when things go well, revenue and cash goes up steadily. But when things go badly, cash accelerates down to the downside. And so if you think you had 6 months worth of cash, when everything goes bad, it turns out you only had about 2. But you don't realize how quickly it can go bad. And on the nonprofit side, I think it's just the importance of the impact, to especially to raise money. And so there are a couple of very good organizations out there that do measurement and evaluation, and having that is one of the keys to scaling as well. So just a couple.
Yeah, Planet. I just had Skyfi on my podcast, their chief strategy officer. So they take satellite images of the globe and sell them. It's quite interesting startup, founded by the Perkins guy, with the book like Don't Die with Zero. He's the author of that. Anyway, I want to ask you, because nowadays your time spent's probably like 30% in nonprofit and 70% for profit. How does your CFO style change between each?
I'm not sure it changes very much, because the nonprofits that I work with are actually pretty aggressive. A lot of times they'll have venture capitalists on the board. And so they, one of the things they like about my experience is that I do have the for-profit experience with VCs, because they are looking to scale quickly. And the foundations that fund them, have that impact at scale mentality. It's like, okay, you got product market fit. Now, how are you going to reach 1 million people in the next 5 years? There are, of course, differences. The nonprofits typically have less organic revenue, although usually they do have some. But on the for-profit side, there is more urgency of getting to the milestones, getting to raising more, the next round of funding, what could go wrong, fixing things, anticipating things a little bit faster, and then you also have probably a more demanding board, because you've got the investors sitting there watching the numbers and making sure that their investments don't go awry.
And then my brain was like, can there be VCs in a nonprofit? They take like a cent on the dollar on every transaction, and they'd give that nonprofit some capital to start. And then are there such things as shares in nonprofits? Can I sell my share to a nonprofit? These are naive questions, but for most of the audience, they won't be.
Yeah. I mean, so nonprofits don't have equity. They have this called net assets. But typically, a venture capitalist will sit on the board as part of their doing good. So they're not necessarily, they're not investing money, although, they can make, their board donations, or they could potentially provide loans that the organization can pay back, depending on the organization. But a lot of it is, just doing good, being interested, and a lot of times there will be they'll run, they might run an organization as well. Like, a lot of times a CEO will run their organization, but then there is some kind of a foundation, or there's a nonprofit tied to it. And so they'll be heavily involved with those.
Right. So I can't make profits off a nonprofit.
No, typically it's, it should be a break-even endeavor.
For a capitalist. All right. So nowadays you're CFO at a bunch of orgs. How is your time split? And let's start with that one. What does a day-to-day look like in your life? You told me when we started that you haven't seen the sun today, you haven't gone out. So tell me about that day-to-day schedule of yours.
Yeah. So I think because I live on the West Coast, San Francisco, my day starts early. So I'm usually at my desk already at 6:30, working, having calls with, Africa, Asia, and I try to finish a little bit earlier, so around 5 o'clock, so I can spend time with the family or exercise. But my day typically on the client side, I'll try to focus on strategy. I work in teams as well, so I have typically an FP&A analyst that does a lot of the modeling, forecasting. I'll have a finance manager as well who looks at a little bit of strategy, and holds the team together. And so I can focus on more like the future, the strategy, the vision of the financials, talking to board members, CEOs of the clients. And then for my company as well, I'll spend quite a bit of time working, talking, coaching my team, and then doing quite a bit of business development as well. So trying to build strategic partnerships, stay in contact with CEOs, investors, directors, and basically generate business, trying to be the rainmaker, but then also trying to replicate myself in the business, or trying to replicate others to be rainmakers, or try to replicate others to grow into a CFO role.
And where's tennis in that?
Tennis is my stress relief. So
Weekends.
weekend, well, also during the week, I try to, my kids have tennis lessons on Tuesday and Thursday. So while they're playing, I try to play. So that's always good. And then I'll play USTA League or some, maybe 1 or 2 tournaments a year with some friends. But mostly these days it's doubles.
And what about podcasts? How frequently do you record and what are you seeking to achieve with that pod?
Yeah, so I've got 2 podcasts. And as you said at the beginning, both were, I feel like, a huge upside of what I thought was going to happen. So I have one that's called Scale by Numbers, that's longer form, and then I have one that's called Ask a CFO, that's 3 to 4 minute clips of questions that I'm being asked that week in the business, that I think are interesting and different. The longer version one is typically comes out. I think it comes out every 2 weeks, and we're basically talking about anything that has to do with the ecosystem of scale ups. So it can be VCs, foundations, professional service providers, corporate attorneys. It can be software relationship managers like Carter or Rippling or anything else that we think people should know about. For instance, when it comes to, we talk about Rippling and PEOs and payrolls, but we discuss the whole system and the different names and the different companies so that, a CEO that might not be accustomed to it all can actually say, oh, that was interesting. Now I can make a decision or be somewhat informed about what payroll system I'm going to use, for example. And then sometimes I'll have, ex-clients, CEOs as well, just talking about what they've learned, and some of the growths that they've seen. So I like it. Like you said, you meet very interesting people, and it's a great way to just build relationships.
It is. So what are your top 3 goals for this year?
So let's see, for Q4, I want to keep building out my team. We've done a pretty good job this year of adding people, and that I'd really look forward to starting next year with probably about 3 more people, whether that's contractors or full time. What else? No more goals for tennis. We just had a big tennis tournament. We had nationals in Vegas last weekend. So that was a big goal. There'll be another one next year, so I got to start training for that. And then I think another goal is just to keep spending a lot of time with the family, and because I really enjoy that. So
Love it. Where can people find out more about you, James?
yeah, so the website is vanreuselventures.com, and my email is james@vanreuselventures.com, and I respond to all my emails. So